Hello everyone, Ace here, and today's video we're going to briefly go over flock cameras and why they are so controversial. Consider this more as a basic overview video rather than anything too in-depth. But this is most certainly an issue worth covering nevertheless. So what exactly are flock cameras? Well, these are cameras placed at major thoroughfares across the United States to read people's license plates as well as what kind of vehicles they're driving, that sort of thing. At least on the surface level. In more practical terms, though, they also utilize AI and can effectively track a person's movements to varying degrees, depending on how thoroughly the system is implemented. For the record, there are over 100,000 such cameras across the US. Now, while that is only one camera for every 3,426 people in the US, they are still spread out in such a way that even tiny hamlets of a few hundred may have multiple cameras around the town. This is not a, oh, it'll never happen here situation. This is a, it's already happening in your neck of the woods sort of situation. Okay, so this is a mass surveillance system, as we've already covered, and that isn't actually all that new. There's entire generations of people at this point in the US who have grown up never knowing what it was like not to live under 24 surveillance. Part of the issue here is the utilization of AI, specifically to facilitate the tracking of individual people at a mass scale. Prior to the use of AI, trying to track an individual's movements through cameras outright required dedicating an officer or agent or whatever, and let's be honest, more like a team of officers or agents or whatever to take shifts, if you wanted to do it 24/7, specifically to spying on that one individual. It was inevitably a significant utilization of manpower and resources in order to accomplish that. It limited the government's capabilities in practical terms to be able to spy on everyone at the same time. AI does ultimately, unsurprisingly, remove the need for such high manpower demands in order to be able to accomplish something like that. With AI, it is actually possible to spy on everyone at the same time, at least on paper. We're still not at quite the scale that the establishment would certainly want with this sort of system. But that's not the only issue at play here, and the only limiting factor previously when it came to mass surveillance. See, previously most of the surveillance was done by private owners of varying sorts, be it cell phone cameras or homeowners that have private security cameras, or of course business owners with their own private security cameras or what have you. What this used to mean is that in order to track someone, at least through video footage, the government would have to go through and get a whole bunch of warrants for a whole bunch of different cameras, or at the very bare minimum, permission from the owners of those cameras to utilize their footage. Of course, with the flock system, it is a centralized setup, operated and owned by one company. So the government doesn't need to get dozens of warrants, or ask dozens of different individuals for permission. It needs to only ask one. Worse yet, Flock as a company is not demanding warrants for the government to utilize its system. Now, you might be thinking that this currently only applies to vehicles, except there is evidence to suggest that the system is intended to not just apply to vehicles, but also apply to people directly themselves, with the ability to search based on clothing or tattoos or scars or what have you. So yeah, this is a mass surveillance system designed specifically enable the government to physically track people on a mass scale. Now for a moment, let's discuss a separate issue that is nevertheless similar and connected to this, that being the issue of phone tracking data, which it has recently been determined by the US Supreme Court requires a search warrant to access. The issue here, of course, and the reason why this is linked, is that this is the same overall problem. The government is tracking people on a mass scale, and currently, with the flock system, does not need a warrant, or at the very bare minimum is not getting warrants. This is probably going to lead to a Supreme Court sort of situation itself, but it is the same overall problem, and it is the same overall Fourth Amendment matter. So for the people who are of the opinion that the flock system violates their rights, that does actually legitimately appear to be the case. That, however, is not the only issue at play here when it comes to the flock system. Firstly, it is very very possible for ne'er-do-wells to abuse the system. Yes, it is currently government agencies and police departments that are utilizing the Flock system. However, what everyone seems to forget is that when dealing with institutions that number in the millions of people, it is statistically inevitable, no matter how strict your hiring practices are, that you're still going to get at least a few murder hobos. As such, there are already reported cases of at least a handful of officers getting fired for abusing the Flock system to spy on people they don't necessarily like in order to track their movements. Yes, these are fluke occurrences in the grand scheme of things, but it's not exactly a fluke occurrence for the individuals that have been impacted, the individuals that have been spied upon and their rights violated by creepy stalkers. A separate issue that is also worth bringing up is, of course, the fact that there are instances of the AI algorithms simply being incorrect, and the wrong guy getting blamed for a crime, and facing arrest for a crime they simply did not commit. Yes, this does once again appear to be a fluke incident, and yes, no system is perfect, but we're still looking at examples of this happening, and considering just how shoddy AI can be sometimes with everyday use, a factor that I am sure that most people that are watching this video know all too well. So yes, there are a number of reasons why people are outraged by the Flock system. It's very easy to be abused, even when it works correctly, and even outside of that, the non-abuse and intended use of it still is a violation of people's rights, at least when no warrants are involved in obtaining the information by the government. And even outside of that, there is of course the inevitable possibility that the system will get hacked, and everyone's information will just be made publicly available whether they like it or not. Because hackers are looking at the Flock system the same way that bank robbers are looking and fantasizing about Fort Knox. The difference here, of course, is that with online security being what it is, in comparison to the physical security of locations like Fort Knox, and on top of that, the fact that the hackers may or may not be in a country that does not extradite to the US in the first place, yeah, the combination of less risk, less difficulty, and massive financial incentives means that, yeah, there's a greater likelihood of Flock getting hacked than Fort Knox getting robbed. So it's no wonder there are examples of people going around destroying Flock cameras, even though that is admittedly a crime and you should not actually do that. It is actually a felony to do that, for the record. You know, the kind of crime that greatly hinders your employment possibilities, as well as restrict your inherent rights that were inscribed in the Bill of Rights. Something that you think it should not be able to do, what with it being written into the Constitution that it's not able to do that, but here we are. In other words, really don't do that. Really don't destroy the cameras, because they will ruin your life over that. Instead, this is a matter that should be taken up to the Supreme Court, because like I said, the baseline is already there for it to need a warrant. The precedent was set by the Supreme Court, at least with phone tracking. It just needs to be applied here too. It won't completely fix the problem, but it will be a great start to that at the very least.